Hi, everybody, and welcome to our session, Building Trust in AI Experiences with Eye Tracking. I'm Quirks editor Joe Ridholm. Thanks so much for joining us wherever you are. Just a quick reminder that you can use the chat tab if you'd like to interact with other attendees during our discussion. And you can use the Q&A tab to submit questions to the presenter, and we'll get to as many as we have time for during the Q&A at the end. Our session is presented by Tobii. Sylvia, take it away.
All right, thank you so much, Joe. I appreciate it. So thank you everyone for joining. I'm Sylvia Knust. I'm Director of Professional Services, both the US and EMEA for Tobii. And I'm here today to talk about building trust in AI experiences with eye tracking. So I'm happy to be here. And I see there's a question of where people joining from. I'm actually out of the Northwoods in Wisconsin right now. So if there is anybody near me, let me know. I'd be curious to see that. All right, but getting on with things. It's hard to believe, but I've actually been involved now with eye tracking for nearly 30 years. It's been exciting to watch how it's evolved from when it was first used mostly for military experiences or medical research, and then to packaged research and to web research when the internet got going way back when. Back when it was still static and there were banner ads that we were testing to see what kind of ads people noticed. So that really goes back a ways. But now we have these hyper-personalized experiences, these dynamic digital ecosystems across multiple surfaces, multiple platforms, with new features, new designs developing at breakneck speed, driven by AI, right? Spearheaded by evolving AI design. Eye tracking has had to really change a lot in response to the new environment, the new ecosystems we work in, the technology, the methodologies, the applications, but it has changed, and aggressively so, and especially in the last year, and that's what I'd like to talk to today. So let's first start with what is trust in AI design, right? It's the trust is a user's belief that the ecosystem, or that the system that you were working with is clear, it's credible, it will support your goals without confusion, without hesitation, and without doubt. Good design keeps users moving forward with confidence. So we can think about that customer journey. AI is creating and enhancing features along the way to help us work faster, to do more, ideally with more confidence, but it only works if people notice it. It only works if people process it the right way after they notice it and if they can trust it. And it's difficult because trust forms in just seconds. It can break even faster. It can take you really hard to rebuild. So how do we research and design for this? How do we identify those critical moments? How do we make sure that we've optimized that design for that AI experience to drive trust so that it is perceived as relevant and it is perceived as valuable and people move forward with it? So I want to take a closer look at some of these critical moments. What needs to happen for the customer to move forward with confidence rather than disengage, or even worse, lose trust and respect for that brand, for that product, for that experience? First, most important, they have to notice it. If they don't see it, it's never going to be experienced. It's never going to be, you're never going to have a reaction. But even if they do see it, that does not necessarily mean they'll process or respond to it. There are stages that our brain moves through very quickly that we're not even aware of. First, we think about like, what is it? Is it worth my attention? Is it even worth me pausing longer than just like 60 milliseconds to actually pay attention to it, process it, to see what it means? Right now, it's in your short-term memory, and your brain is making decisions really without you being aware of it, of whether or not it's worth becoming aware of and processing, and whether it's basically whether to stay or go. Essentially, you've got a brief glance. Do I stay? Do I go? Do I keep looking at it? Okay, let's say we've decided to stay. We look at it a bit longer to see if it adds value in the moment. Do I understand what it is? Does it have meaning or value to me? Do I understand what it's telling me to do and how? And finally, do I trust what it's telling me to do, right? So you have to see it. You have to trust what you see, whether the source, or somehow decide, yes, this is a value to me, and then trust that next step for it to move forward. And then we get that response, either a glance at the next element that's important to you, either a click, maybe it's just a thought, a reaction, a change in perception. But this is kind of the process, these micro moments that we have to go through. So AI is all around us, but I would argue that the theme is pretty much the same, right? For any vertical application, the goals are to get noticed across these channels and through the noise, to add value in that moment, and keep in mind a fast-moving world, we're easily overwhelmed, and to drive positive action, either towards that brand, towards that product, or towards the experience, and to build trust along the way with each step. So what does eye tracking do? How does it help us? What can it do for us? It captures moments in real life and allow us to study and understand them in a way that no other research methodology really can. What it captures is real, solid, observable data points, where we are looking, how we are processing that information, and what we decide to do next. So let's take a look at this particular video of a shopping video. So this is a sample eye tracking video. You can see the environment from the shopper's point of view. You can see in real time where they're looking, how long they're looking, what they missed. You can follow along what typically, notice how they went real broad. First, they're just navigating the area. Now they're zooming in on a shelf, their particular area. Now they're comparing different product groups. And gradually they narrow in. Now these are all decisions they've made along the way, micro decisions they've made along the way. I'm going to move in that direction. I'm going to scan this shelf. I'm going to narrow in on this area. I'm going to just scan across these particular products. So we see that whole process in that customer journey and all these little micro decisions they make, and they're based around what's noticed, how it's processed, and the next step that they take from there. So this is kind of what we're going for. I want to take a couple minutes now just to talk about eye tracking research in general, but how it fits into AI, today's AI-driven landscape. There are a few misconceptions I want to talk to. I still encounter these today. Now, granted, they were all based in legit problems with eye tracking over the years. If you go back 15, 20 years, even 10 years, there were some of these rules, guidelines applied. There was a time where you had to sit totally still, like you weren't allowed to move much. Like, okay, sit at your desk and we can eye track you as long as you don't move your head. Okay, that's changed a lot. There was also a guideline, it had to be in a controlled environment, in a central test facility. Okay, sorry, but we can only do it for computer screens and nothing else. We have to use static content or standardized content or prototypes. And that has still been in the last few years, if you want to have like standard heat maps where you aggregate all the data onto one background. But even that is not necessary anymore, because today, if you testing prototypes just doesn't give you the same value as people experiencing the favorite apps the way they have them set up. We want to have those personalized experiences, and we can still do heat maps. We can still do metrics. For a while it said, hey, one surface only. It's either going to be an app or a computer screen or a digital science. Like, no, whatever. We can have all the surfaces you want, all the different channels. Also feeling that too much effort, too little value, that it's difficult to add to research. That is definitely not the case anymore. It has never been so easy to add eye tracking to your research. Literally all you have to do is put eye tracking glasses on. You can set it up any way you want, excuse me, and then just put the glasses on and you're eye tracking. And you can watch eye tracking live. You can watch those recordings. Feeling that was only heat maps or video output, also not the case anymore. And that it was too slow to get results. That is still an element, but it's gotten so much faster because just the capabilities are so much more that you can do it very, very quickly. Some outputs are now instant. Others can be processed very quickly based on the goals that we have. I also want to just touch on the topic, right, of AI, eye tracking research versus AI in research. I think that's an important topic to think about. And AI can be very effective. Now, one of the challenges is that it tends to use past behaviors, right? It's everything we already know, and it models and it predicts the next behaviors, what's a good probability of happening. But it's based on essentially what we already know, what's kind of already been established, where eye tracking is actual attention, actual behaviors in that moment, tracking how these change every day in response to environments that are changing incredibly quickly. And that's something that I've definitely seen, is that this goes way back to when they first had ads on the internet, and people's attention patterns were changing based on the banner ads, right? Banner blindness, and then based on certain ad designs, ad blindness. We change in response to our environment. So as there's new elements out there, we respond to them differently. And so you need to keep testing these things to understand how they change. And the other benefit of using eye tracking with this research is it allows you to dig into the why of human behavior and define opportunities that we aren't really fully aware of. And that's really what we're going to dig into quite a bit more as we go along in this presentation. Really quickly, because I want to make sure I have time to dig into our use case today, but just touching on the different systems and applications available today. Advanced screen testing and wearables, you can literally test anything, anywhere, except underwater, I suppose, but everything else you can do. Fielding in complex environments, and that has definitely been a challenge, but right, like we are now surrounded by so much digital concepts and platforms and services. We can do all of that, no matter how dynamic and interactive. The third bullet, really important, we're super precise and high speed with the attention data, because we're learning, and I've learned over the years now, our attention span is getting much faster, our reaction time is getting much faster, we're making decisions much faster, especially whether to go or stay, right, reject or accept type of thing. It used to be we could just look at these general things of like general dwell time, but now we're looking at saccades, we're looking at fixations, we're looking at that 60 millisecond period of time. Like, are you going to stay or not? So it's getting much more precise, and our analysis processes have gotten much faster. They have to. We have to keep up. So, so moving along. Here, I'm going to get into a little bit into some outputs. Most of you are likely very familiar with traditional heat maps. For today's use case, we're actually going to look at, or to kind of get into this use case, the scatter plot. So this is the visual pattern for one person. It can be lots of people, but right now we're kind of focusing a little bit more qualitative here, a little bit more on each individual to understand trust, because it's such a nuanced personal experience, even though it does reflect bigger patterns. So this is a visual pattern for one person over 20 seconds. Each dot is a fixation, and the eyes have paused. It's basically one dot is kind of where the eyes have paused long enough to process the information that's there, to make a decision of whether to stay or go. So they're not processing enough to say, oh, do I trust this, or does this add value? This is just, do I care enough right now to stay here or not? So consciously, you're not even aware of that, to be honest. Like if you were to be asked, like, what do you remember seeing? You'll just remember seeing things where there's lots of clusters of dots that you actually spend some time on. So that first dot is just, am I going to stay or go? And that's what we look for to see if it's even paying attention to. And I notice there's also some things that are missed entirely. So we do want to look at that fixation, but that fixation alone indicates only that initial processing. That is in short-term memory only. This glance will not have a chance in long-term memory or to impact the user in any meaningful way unless they continue to fixate on that specific element. And we see several dots, right? Where we see layers of dots. We need to see more of them to indicate that they're pausing, they're reflecting, and they're processing at a deeper level. But that prompts the next question. When we see those numbers of fixations on the element, is it because they like it and it adds value? Or is it confusing and difficult to understand? They're having to reread it. Like what's going on in their mind at that time? And we want to get at that. We want to know what they're thinking about at that point. We'll get to that in a moment. What we do see clearly here is the flow of attention, the behavior after each fixation. Do they stay? Do they go? Where do they go? What do they look at next? What do they click? How are they continuing the journey? And is it the way we want them to, in the right direction? So if you think back to our original list of goals, getting noticed, right? Which elements get noticed? Which then, where do they stay? And where do they feel that it adds value? Does it drive positive action? And we've seen some interesting patterns here already of like, yep, noticed this, considered it, rejected it, missed some entirely, ignored some entirely. Rather deliberately, when you see patterns like that, cut that close around an area, you're like deliberately ignoring that. Okay, so moving on. With eye tracking, you can do a lot, and I could talk for ages on all these different things, but I'm going to focus on some very particular outputs today, and specifically for AI research. But just as a kind of a review that all of these apply, right? And it kind of goes from like instant to where, yes, you have to do a little bit of analysis and processing, but the instant is the live viewing, right? Just live eye tracking sessions. So basically now you can see the task, the world from the point of view of the participant, see where they're looking. And literally, it's so easy to add. Any research you're doing, have them put glasses on and you'll see the live output. You'll see the recording, like that shopping video that we just saw. You'll see that. So already you can see the world from the participant's point of view, how they're looking at things, and start thinking about what are the questions that are coming up in your mind that you want to ask. Like, oh, you paused on this, you reached for it, but then you didn't. Can you tell me what you were thinking? What was missing? Right? Let those questions start evolving. And those are then questions that you can kind of enhance and refine your exit or your in-depth interview with. Then we can also use the video during the playback. And that's what we want to focus on today is this, what we call a retrospective think aloud. The idea is that when they're doing their tasks, right? When they're shopping, when they're using an app, when they're shopping on a website, you'd love to know what they're thinking. Like, what are you thinking? What are you feeling? What's your experience here internally? We'd love to know that. But if you ask them to talk it out loud, it changes everything. It changes their whole experience with it. Now they're performing for you. They're not feeling and just doing naturally. So what we do instead is we play back the video afterwards and we let them watch that video. We take a moment and say, okay, this is you shopping. That dot is your eye movements. What are you thinking about this now when you see yourself? Notice how fast they're surprised their eyes move so fast. They're surprised at all the things they looked at and don't even remember looking at. They're surprised when you dig a little bit and ask questions of like, yeah, you glanced at this, but you reach for something else. Why? They're like, oh yeah, because I wasn't sure if this was the right thing. Or the other way around, oh my gosh, so many times they'll take a package, they'll reach for it as they're looking at a different package. And what that means is they're not sure. They think this is the right one, they want to believe it's the right one, but they're also seeing this other package and they're thinking, maybe I should take that one. And when you see that disconnect between what they have their mouse hovering on and what they're looking at, there's something off here, and it's an opportunity to dig in and understand. Other visualizations, heat maps, we can do those, opacity maps, gaze overlay videos to highlight behaviors, the scan path and scatter plots, like what we just talked about a little bit, and of course, all these metrics, quantitative metrics, a variety. I mean, there's just so many we could go into, but I don't have time today, but feel free to follow up with questions on those for sure. Okay, so we're looking at specifically that video replay and how to leverage that. We're gonna go this in the stages. First, we're going to take the step of, so think about this. This is what I would encourage you to do when you're watching live videos and you have an in-depth interview coming up afterwards, right? So think about the scatter plot. Remember how we saw like an isolated dot that said, okay, they're paused, they noticed it, they're deciding whether or not they should stay or go. And then there's a bit of a cluster. Okay, now they've decided to stay and they're spending more time on it. What's the feedback? How are they thinking? What are they thinking about it? Are they confused or is it clear? We can even look at that scatter plot and we can tell like if it's a messy scatter plot that suggests confusion, or is it like, hey, they're reading and they're understanding and processing. So we can go to that level. So think about that scatter plot. Now look for these patterns in this video as we watch it, okay? So I'm gonna play it and here's what I want you to do. I want you to imagine that you're sitting in the back room of the viewing room with clients, with stakeholders, and you're watching a live view, and you're wanting to understand how this online shopping experience, and how are they reacting to the AI features, okay? So the red dot showing us where they're moving. You see their scan, they pause, okay, they just pause again on the AI, now they're reading it. And you're like, I wonder what they're thinking about right now when they read it. And are they gonna click on more? Are they gonna actually, okay, well, they didn't, interesting. Why not? Why didn't they click into the AI recommendations that was going to be listed? Okay, now they're looking at this particular look. See, the mouse is now on that item, but they're looking at something else. So that's interesting to me. I'd be like, wow, how come you think you're about to click on that? You look at something else, and now you go to the filter. So you didn't click on it. Why not? You didn't think it was the right thing. Why not? Can you tell me a little bit more about that? So now they've gone to the filters, but they didn't select on a filter. Why not? What was missing? Now they're typing in something a little bit different. So you can kind of see as I sit by there and you're with your stakeholders, you're sitting back there watching this, and you can talk about these things, saying, okay, now they're spending more time looking at the AI. Sounds like they kind of want something there, and maybe they're going to dig. Now they did click into it. Okay, cool, but they didn't click more. They just clicked a little bit more. Now they're going to go all the way. Okay, they did. But the point is, you with your stakeholders in the back, the clients who likely will know more and have more expertise about whatever it is they're trying to design, and you have the research expertise and the attention research expertise, you can have those conversations and say, and figure out what are those questions now that you want to prioritize in that interview based on this video. So that's kind of the first step. Think about that scatter plot, the different patterns, the short fixations, the longer fixations, the movements, seeing those in the video, think about what questions you want to ask, and let that guide your interview. Let that guide and direct and refine your interview process. Okay, so that's kind of building us up to our case study. We want to go a little bit deeper, essentially, using that retrospective think aloud. So we've kind of built up our tools here, and now we're going to try it. So here was the research objective was understanding how users develop trust in AI-generated recommendations. So literally, kind of that video we just looked at, like what is the reaction to those AI experience when it brings up recommendations of particular products and brands, and how can we continue to improve those designs? So it's challenges, right? Hyper-personalized. We want people to use their own accounts, their own devices, not prototypes, because it's already refined to their experience. Those critical moments are quick, they're brief, it's difficult to capture and unpack. We're dealing with trust in these short moments, and there's a tendency of bias towards what the moment, participants, especially in that qualitative feedback, they often want to share positive things, so it can be difficult to get them to really give you something more concrete. So how do we unpack those things that are difficult to observe and define? So really quick, again, the goal here, the objective for design was optimizing those moments of truth with AI-generated recommendations within those e-commerce experiences. And the desired output for the client was to really optimize those moments in time, the format for AI integration, promote the noticeability and engagement, and especially what are those cues that drive trust and inhibit any doubt. And right today, these days with digital content, there's more mistrust and there's more doubt, uncertainty around that. So we intercepted people in high traffic areas. We used glasses, like literally, we just stopped people in high traffic areas. We're like, hey, you want to participate in this research? Bring up an app that you use for shopping, put these glasses on, and then we did the retrospective Think Aloud. And the way that Think Aloud works, so again, this should look familiar now. This is the same video. We're going to use just the same one because it's more familiar. Again, some of the kind of the rules or guidelines. You want natural user interactions, right? No talking out loud, no explaining what you're thinking, just supernatural. Just put these glasses on, do your thing. We observe those attention patterns and all those clicks and behaviors in real time. And as you're observing it, we let those crystallize. And so keep in mind, remember some of those questions we had in our mind as we were watching the video. Include those stakeholders. It is so helpful to have the stakeholders involved. And you can do this remotely. You can do this any way you want, but have them watch and have them share. It's amazing what you can learn from what's important to them and how they think about their products and designs. Prioritize those key moments and questions, and then play this back during the interview. So pick your points and time and play those back during the interview. And here's an example of kind of what the outcomes are, right? So these are some recordings and snapshots. You see the scatter plot again, and you're going to see a video here. And so this was on mobile devices, very similar to that video that you saw on the PC, but we were watching them reading through the AI. And what you'll notice here is like these multiple patterns. They go back and reread it again, and then they go back and reread it again and again. And we're like, why? So in the interview, we literally played this back and we said, hey, we noticed this. We noticed that you kept kind of going back and rereading it a few times. Was it why? You know, we wanted to know, was it confusing? Was it hard to understand? Was it what's happening here? And they said, no, you know, that it was hitting the key points. And I skimmed it first and I was like, wow, wait a minute, it touched on exactly the points I wanted to. So, and then I would remember other things I wanted to know. And I went back and I was like, oh yeah, they touched on it here. So the first time through, they didn't read everything yet. They were doing an initial skim. Is it worth my time? And they went through it again. They said, yeah, it is worth my time. And they went through it a third time. They're like, yeah, actually, it's got me figured out perfectly. I'm going to find out what these recommendations are. So then they went to the recommendation page over here on the second one. They scanned the top, saw these recommendations, they swiped through a couple, and then what you notice here, this is actually the third recommendation. And then they look to the right, you can see the dots, the fixation, because they're trying to swipe again. They want to swipe to the next recommendation and the next recommendation. They wanted to see more than just the top three. This wasn't enough. This didn't give me enough confidence that this was actually designed for me, because they're used to kind of the sponsor recommendations, right? We always see like 2 or 3 sponsored recommendations, and it's like, well, those are paid. They're not thinking about what I need, what I want. So there's quite a bit you have to work towards to rebuild that trust. And then on this third example, you can see they briefly considered several other products, and then they spent a ton of time just on this particular one. Why? And that's the one they ended up clicking on. But they had their mouse on this first one first, then glanced at these others 2, then looked over at this one. And again, why? So as they watched their own eye movements, they kind of relived the experience, and they can tell you those nuanced decisions they made that at the time they weren't even aware of. And if you didn't play the video, you might get some broad feedback, but this gets super nuanced, super tight, super focused on specific design elements and experiences. So how to move forward with that? I am super excited about eye tracking. I think it adds so much value to the research that we do. And I'll share with you a few things over the 30 years to highlight, you know, just the value I've seen in it and why today especially it's so important. What I've learned over the last 3 years, attention spans, they really are getting shorter and shorter. Eyes move so quickly. That's usually the first thing people will say when they watch an eye tracking video themselves. They also that we look at and we process so much that we are not consciously aware of. But if we look at the eye movements and the scatter plots and the videos, we can see and understand a lot more about what our brain is doing that we can't necessarily articulate without seeing that and understanding that. The other thing is just about general research. Kind of touched on a lot of these already. Tunnel vision and bias is real for participants and researchers. And that's the thing, like as soon as you start designing a study, right? And I know sometimes you have to, but as soon as you put parameters on that, you're already introducing bias, where you want to try and keep things a little bit more open. Keep it real. I cannot stress that enough. Natural environments, natural behaviors, whatever they normally do, use their own phone, use their own apps, keep it natural. Perceptions and behaviors super quick to change. I can't stress how important it is to test often. And for me, doing research without eye tracking is like flying blind. It's really hard. Like there's so much going on that I don't understand or don't know because I don't see where they're looking. So you can use it in all these different applications. observe the world through the eyes of you. Just that alone can really do so much to understand how people are engaging with the world around you, can break a lot of assumptions. It can inspire your designers. You can use it to probe and get deeper at those really tricky questions. Define those key moments that are so important, and take a moment to really dig into that and understand how to design for it and develop guidelines. Specifically for eye tracking research, or excuse me, AI research, right? It provides that first person data, that real-time focus and attention, like what's happening right now, highlights those critical decision-making moments, and you can use that to unpack that moment and the impact on trust and how to design better to create trust. So that is it. Happy to connect more. I will take some questions. So I went a bit longer, but we have a few minutes for any questions.
All right, there's a great one here that I think other people might be asking too, is how do the glasses work, for people who already wear glasses? How do you deal with that situation?
Excellent question, and absolutely a concern, because we certainly don't want to we want to hit the entire population potentially, right, and not target down just the people who aren't wearing glasses. So luckily, we actually include the glasses have a lens kit. So it actually is able to swap out lenses very quickly, or we add lenses basically, that it's for the prescription that you need. So, and I think it ranges now, might have to double check, but I think it ranges all the way from like -5 to +5 or something, but a full range. So it's actually no issue. It adds about 30 seconds to the process. We just have to put some other glass, like lenses, they're little magnets we just stick on top, and you're still able to use it. Yes, that's not an issue.
Right. I suppose it, as with so many things, it kind of depends, but where in your current research or testing process, do you think eye tracking could reveal something that other methods might not be able to?
I think for me, and I guess, and maybe I'm a little biased just because of the presentation, but I think what's the moments that stand out over the last 20 years that just were like, boom, that was awesome, is when somewhere early on, and they still happen now later on, is when we're watching these eye tracking sessions live in the back room with clients. And the designers will be there. When the designers can sit in, they watch the eye movements, and in their mind, right, they think, oh, they're totally going to see that and click on it, and it's going to go fine. And they miss it. And they don't, because they're kind of so tunnel vision into their own like way of looking at it. Then to see through the eyes of their users changes it completely. It just puts them outside. And so I think what I just see is the easiest, biggest instant impact of just like a wow moment is seeing the eye tracking videos, seeing your product being used by a participant, by a shopper, through their eyes, and suddenly recognizing, wow, I never thought about all the other distractions going on. I never realized that the way they hold their phone, they would never even see that particular design. So just seeing the experience through the eyes of the user, seeing how fast their eyes move, seeing how much distraction is around you in the world, just all the noise you have to deal with. I think just in an instant, right? You can watch a video clip for like 3 seconds and get that and feel it like almost viscerally. And I think that is one of the things that eye tracking is just amazing. And you can share that in reports or with clients. Like it really shifts your way of thinking very quickly.
Right. Question here just about they're new to the technology. When you're doing eye tracking, what kind of sample do you need?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, and that can go to several different levels. When it's more exploratory, and so we kind of have this range, right? Super exploratory, where you're not sure yet what you're looking at, and you just kind of want to see. So you can just kind of dip into the process, and maybe even a sample of 8 to 12 can already give you a lot of information, where you're just watching these videos and doing these playbacks. Now, as soon as you want to understand how different populations compare to each other, so maybe how young people use something versus older people, or male, female, whatever the different segments might be, you want to have like more cells with that 8 to 12 within each one. But that's more the discovery side of things, a little bit more on the qualitative side of things. If you're testing different designs, then you're going to want to increase your numbers, because now, but the cool thing with eye tracking data is we have a lot of it, right? It's collecting, I think, anywhere from 60 to 120 samples per second. We have a lot of quant data there, and there's not as much noise, like if you look at the attention. But nonetheless, you still want to go with larger samples. We usually recommend starting anywhere from 24 and going up. Again, looking if you're segmenting that data in different ways. So yes, it does depend, but we do have recommendations for specific scenarios for sure.
Sure. Well, we are out of time, unfortunately. Thanks to everybody out there for watching, and thanks, Sylvia, for a great presentation. We really appreciate it. So enjoy the rest of your day, everybody.
Thank you. Appreciate it.